As you may or may not know, the Ableton Push 2 is an unbelievable powerhouse piece of hardware. And under the surface, there is so much power, there's so much capability that we can tap into. So in this video, I want to go over my top five pro tips that you may not know about to really unlock the Push 2's potential in really cool ways. So let's dive in. Hey yo, it's Alex from My Music, and as always with this channel, it's my mission to help musicians produce themselves by developing their mindset, expanding their creativity, and connecting to their inner artist in a deeper way. And in this video, we're diving deep into my top 5 tips for the Push 2 to really help you unlock its power to a whole other level. And hey, if you're just getting started with the Push 2 and you're not really sure how to use it properly, I created a whole separate video of how you can learn the ins and the outs of this magnificent piece of hardware in just 20 minutes. So if you're interested in checking that out, I'll link it in the card above. I also created another video going over how to play chords and how to come up with your own voicings and all different kinds of chords and how to play them on Push 2. So if you're interested in that, I'll also link it in the card above. All right, but enough of that. Let's dive into these top 5 tips to unlock your Push 2 to the next level. All right, so tip number 1 is changing the Push 2's workflow mode to clip workflow. And we can access this if we go to the setup button in the top right-hand corner, hit that, we get this menu, and you'll notice that the workflow is set to scene by default. All right, and there's only 2 options here. There's scene and there's clip. All right, so my first tip is to actually change this workflow to clip, and then we get out of setup. And now with this, there's a few things that are actually advantageous in this workflow mode. All right, so when we're in scene view and we're in note mode and we use these arrows on the push, we can use these arrows to navigate the session. But when we're in scene view, you'll notice that as I move down to a different scene, it actually triggers all the other clips in that scene every single time. All right, so if I want to select a different clip, let's say I was working on this, we got this loop going. Let's say I just wanted to create a new clip for this bass line. All right, if I hit down, it's going to actually trigger the whole next scene and stop the first drum loop from playing. All right, so let's go to clip view, and let's try doing that again. So if we go to clip view, and we trigger this. Okay, we go to note mode. Okay, and let's say that we wanted to just create a new bass line because we have a new bass line idea, right? If we hit down, you'll notice that it keeps the drum beat playing, but now it allows me to record a new clip into this one clip slot, and that's what clip workflow allows you to do. It selects one clip at a time. So notice that if I go down now to different scenes, it's not triggering the whole scene. It's just triggering the one clip I have selected. At the same time, when I go right and left, I'm only selecting one clip. So the advantage of this is that you could have a scene playing, and then you could go select specific clip slots to record new ideas, and you don't have to go in and record enable a track. You just hit record, and it'll record to that selected clip slot. So for example, I'll launch the scene, then I'll hit the down arrow I'll play a few different bass lines. So let's go up and let's trigger this scene. All right, so let's say I wanted to come up with a new bass line. So we'll go in note mode, we're on the bass track. So I'll hit down. And now I just have to hit record, and you'll notice it records a new clip. Right, great, maybe I want another bass line, so I'll hit down again. And again, it's just that simple. Right, you can keep doing this. Just hit the down arrow and we can record a new clip, a new idea. And the power of this is that you can just crank out a bunch of ideas, a bunch of different variations without worrying about copying the scene over and triggering a bunch of different elements. You can just stay with one scene that you have and try out a bunch of different clip ideas. All right, tip number 2 is to actually hold shift when adjusting any parameter for more fine control, for higher resolution control. And this is actually super powerful, especially with, let's say, loop selections or anything like that. So yes, you can use it with like your wet dry amount or an effect or any parameter you want. Just hold shift, and then when you move the encoder, it'll move in smaller values. So I'll go ahead and show that to you. So for example, if I pull up this loop selector here on my push, I can actually change the loop position by divisions of 1 bar, right? And which is handy. But let's say I wanted to start on an 8th note or a 16th note. Now, if I hold shift and I move this, you'll notice that I get a finer resolution, right? I can select 16th notes. So I can start this on in the middle of a beat or something. Right, and this is a great way to take an existing loop and to experiment with displacing it in a high resolution amount to see what kind of results we can get. All right, so if we go to session view, I'll trigger this other beat. Let's go to what's happening here, and I'm gonna actually shift the loop position and see what happens. Interesting. Right? And just by doing small adjustments like that and experimenting, you can come up with really interesting drum parts that you probably would have never programmed by yourself. All right, tip number 3 is step sequencing automation. And this is so powerful because, as you may or may not know, in the Push 2's workflow, you can actually hit automate and record automation into a clip by changing parameters and everything you change will be recorded in real time, and it will be recorded into that clip. All right, and this is super powerful, but it's not that easy to automate stuff in real time and really get the exact result you want. And this is where step sequencing automation comes in. So for example, let's go to a different beat. All right, so let's actually just focus in on this one drum beat, okay? And let's say we wanted to add some delay onto the snare hits, okay? So what you can do from the push is actually, with a drum rack, you can select any specific thing. So let's find our snare. So here's our snare, right? And the great thing about Ableton and Push 2 is that in a drum rack, when you've selected a sample, you can add a device specifically to that sample, right? So if I add a delay with the snare selected, it's not going to add a delay to my whole drum kit. It'll just add a delay to that snare sample, which is super awesome. So let's select that snare. Let's hit add device. Let's scroll down into audio effects, delay, and just a straight up delay. And let's throw it on there. So now let's listen to what we got. Cool. So we got a delay on that snare, and that's super great. But let's say we wanted to automate. Let's say we only wanted the delay to happen on every second snare. All right, so this is where the step sequencing automation comes in, and it's super powerful. So to start, what you would do is let's turn the wet dry all the way down. So now there's no delay happening. And with the push, it's super intuitive. You basically just touch and hold a step that you want to automate something on, and then you can select how long you want that automation to happen, right? So right now we have whatever this is, like 2 8th notes, but we probably want this to happen for this amount of time, right? So what I'm going to do is while holding this, I'm going to turn up the dry wet to about 50, and I'm going to do the same thing with this 4th snare hit. I'm going to hold it, and you can select the amount of time you want whatever automation to happen, and then we're going to do the same thing with this dry wet. We're going to go up to 50, and now I'm going to let go. And now as we play, notice that this dry wet knob, my face is in the way, but notice how this dry wet knob of our delay is actually going to move only for the 2nd and 4th snare hit. All right, so let's go ahead and play. Right, how powerful is that? That's pretty crazy. And you can do this with anything. So let's say we wanted to add a reverb just to the 1st and 3rd snare. All right, that's super easy. We'll just go to that snare hit, add device, go down to your audio effects. Let's go for reverb. Just a standard reverb is fine. Go there. Now we have a reverb, but now it's on our whole kit. So again, we'll take this dry wet down. We'll hold and select the 1st snare, right? And we want this to happen for longer than just one single 16th note, right? We want it to happen for longer. So I'm going to select this range. I'm going to kick it up to 50, and we'll do the same thing with the third one. Kick it up to 50. And now let's listen. So the snare 1 and 3 is going to have reverb, and the snare 2 and 4 is going to have delay, and it's just automated on for the specific length of time I've selected. Right? That is so powerful to get really granular with your automations and just programming them into each clip individually. All right, the next quick tip is to actually quick select a specific sample in your drum rack in the mixer view. All right, so we have all these different elements, but sometimes when you preload a drum rack or when you're working with your own samples, you have to rebalance the volumes. Right, and within the context of a drum rack, adjusting the volume of individual samples, it's not super intuitive. It kind of takes some digging around to actually be able to do it. So what you can do is while you're in your drum rack, let's go to the mix view. I only have 2 tracks here that actually have clips, but all of our tracks are represented here. But what you can do is with any drum rack, you can click this button to select the track and open up your drum rack. And you'll notice that all of these volumes pop up for each individual sample, which is great because now we can adjust the volume very easily. But now you have so many things to select from to go find, like, let's say I want to change this. Okay, I see it there. That's over there. But this sample, oh, I can't even see it. I have to scroll. But what you can do is just hold select and hit whatever sample you want to adjust the volume of. So let's say this thing, and it will automatically select it in your mixer. And then let's say we want to turn this up. Right? Let's say you want to turn this down, select it, boom. Just turn it down. Right, and when you have a drum rack with 64 pads, this becomes super handy to be able to adjust volumes really quickly. Right, so like let's say I want to adjust the volume of this kick to be a little bit louder. When I hit it, I don't actually see it in my mixer view, so I would have to actually navigate with the arrows, but you can just hold select and select the sample you want to adjust the volume of, and it'll take you to that specific volume fader. Right? Super cool. All right, and tip number 5, the final tip that I have for you today is actually the drum rack layout. And by layout, I don't mean necessarily choosing samples, but I mean how you lay them out on the drum pads. And I know that this was an absolute game changer for me and playing drums, finger drumming on the Push 2. So let me show you a little bit of that. When you load up a drum rack in Ableton, there'll be a bunch of awesome samples that have been curated and put together in one kit that works. And this is great. However, usually you have to find out where everything is. Like here's my kick, here's a hi-hat, right? There's a snare. And that's okay because you can find out the samples and where they're at and then quickly find a way to play them. But what I'm suggesting is actually creating a layout that lends itself better to actual drumming. So a great way to think about this is to really start thinking like a drummer playing a drum kit, like the one back there, or like how they play the drums. And the best way to actually emulate that is to create a mirror image in your drum rack or with your pads. Okay, so the reason for this is you're going to be able to alternate hands on the same sample or on the same drum, and that's going to help you play the drums a lot more naturally and get that epic back and forth between hands to create fills and really cool grooves. So let me show you that. All right, so first and foremost, I'm just going to focus on kick, snare, and hi-hat just for now. All right, so I found our kick drum, and what we're going to actually do is move the positioning of this kick drum. So what I'm going to do is hold duplicate. I'm going to select this kick, and then I'm going to put it there. Okay, so I've put it in the corner. So now we have our kick in this first pad. But what I'm also going to do is hold duplicate once again, select this, and put it to this pad. So now we have the same sample on 2 different pads. And this might seem weird, but it's going to really make sense in just a second. So next, let's find our closed hi-hat. Okay, there's a closed hi-hat. So let's take this, duplicate it, put it there. So now we have hi-hat here, kick drum here, and let's duplicate this hi-hat and put it here as well. So now we have 2 identical kick samples and 2 identical closed hat samples right here. And let's continue before I actually show you some of the playing techniques. So next, let's find the snare. So let's use that as a snare because it's in the right place. So we want the snare there. So let's hold duplicate and make a mirror image. So let's put it over here. So now we have 2 snares that are mirror image from each other. And finally, let's find an open hi-hat. There's an open hi-hat. So let's take it, duplicate it, put it there, and put it here. So now we have 2 open hi-hats, 2 closed hi-hats, 2 snares, and 2 kicks. And you can actually continue to do this with cymbals, with tom drums, with samples, with anything you can imagine. But having the mirror image will allow you to do rolls. All right. So for example, since these are the same sample, I can use both my hands to alternate playing the sample, right? And you can do like, and really get a natural feel to a drum roll. But now we can actually play with this with the open hi-hat as well. So like, and you would be very, very hard pressed to play something like that if you didn't have this layout. So this is kind of the advantages of this. And once you really get into playing with 2 hands with this kind of layout, you can really start accentuating offbeats. You can do rolls, you can do fills, and you can really get into a whole other dimension of finger drumming. So the power of this is you can keep a very simple beat with one hand and use the other hand to throw in any kind of offbeats or accents that you want to throw in. So for example, I can keep a simple beat with this hand and I'll throw in accents on the offbeat with my left hand. Stuff like that, right? And you can really go far and develop your own techniques, your own kind of drum feel with all of these things. And the ease of how you can play this is so much easier once you get into it than just randomly distributed pads that automatically load up through Ableton. And hey, if you're just getting started with music production and feeling completely overwhelmed by the process, or if you've been at it for a while and having trouble finishing tracks, or hey, if you just want to get a glimpse inside my personal workflow, I've created a super easy to follow 7-step framework to help you go from your very first ideas, arranging your song, editing it, mixing it, mastering it, so you can finish songs and continually get better and better. And it's super handy to have around the studio as a printout, as a framework to follow to keep you on track. So if you're interested in that, you can find it in the description below. And that wraps it up for this video. That's my top 5 Ableton Push 2 tips. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. If you want to stay in the loop for the next MetaMind music transmission, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and let me know, do you have any Ableton tips and tricks that you found out in your journey? I'd love to hear down below. Drop a comment. And until the next video, we'll see you in the next one.